Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome all of you back to another Rage video where tonight, ladies and gentlemen, National Anthem reaction time once again, and this one is going to be a lot of fun in my opinion because this is the National Anthem of Albania, Himni I Flamurit. I'm hopefully get under the impression that I got that name right. I actually like to imagine I do because again, one of the great things that actually I sort of like underplay a little bit when doing a lot of these is that even before I do like the translation videos, I can sort of get a better grasp at exactly what the translation is. If it's things like I said, if it was in Hindustani or if it was in Spanish or if it was in Dutch and stuff like that, you can get a better grasp about some ideas of what the language or what some words are typically supposed to mean. For example, hymni or hymna is a lot of thing that's like more commonly associated with a lot of Spanish or at least Latin American national anthems, but which is again quite a far away from Albania. But even so, I quite like that. There's also certain things about Albania that actually, well, first of all, one thing I'm actually going to put up the flag for just for 1 second because I must admit, I really like the Albanian flag. Not because it just looks so unique to basically anything else in Europe, but take a look at that. It's essentially, I don't know if it's meant to be like either an eagle or a falcon, but it's basically two eagles with outstretched wings on a red background. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the idea for the red background is possibly meant to be something referring to maybe the Cold War, or at least the period between the likes of Enver Hoxha or what during his reign. And well, this is only my assumption. I sadly have no immediate knowledge or context as to how long Enver Hoxha's reign of Albania was. I know there was certainly a very different sort of dictator. That was either Romania or I can't quite remember, but he was someone who was basically executed in '92. Ceausescu, that's who I'm thinking of, but I don't. Ceausescu wasn't Albanian, was he? I don't think he was. I'll look into this, and certainly I will address this when I do my translation for this national anthem, because if you are new to these national anthem reactions, is that whenever we come across an anthem like this, I always go out of my way to do a translation video. Basically, we take a look at the anthem in their own native language, because if I really do want to visit the world and see what I want to see, and everything else that I didn't think I would want to see, then it seems only right and just to actually get to know the language, get to know the people, get to know of their ways. I mean, Albania has such a very wild and expansive history. For example, their motor vehicle of choice is the Mercedes, because I don't know if it's just it's just sort of like one of those like symbols of wealth or influence, people who drive Mercedes. And you'll notice I say motor vehicle and not car, because one of the big things I do know is that car means penis in Albania. That is true. Yep, I know of that. I know there's also, I think peach means something even more inappropriate, but we'll try not. We'll not cross that bridge because it doesn't necessarily entail, good things, unfortunately. Speaking of also not good things, well, we'll see about that, because it may surprise some people to learn is that for 50 years, Albania was many considered to be the first purely atheist country, because religion was basically outlawed during 1941 to 1992. And it resulted in a lot of mosques, churches, synagogues, and probably anything of religious significance having to be destroyed, which is strange. It's really, really strange because I honestly couldn't imagine what that sort of world would look like. And of course, again, it's not nearly the same as that now, but it would have been at one point. Which I do Now I do understand there's also like a lot of other things, like there's something called the zero XHIRO, which is sort of like a tradition in Albania in which residents of a household would go out and just go for walks up and down the street. And this is basically just to say hello to everyone and to make everybody know about just where they are and stuff like that, which isn't actually is actually quite a very social idea, and it's again not the sort of thing that first would come into mind. But then again, there is so much about Albania's beliefs and a lot about their traditions that I'm probably going to just straight up just say I'm going to cut at this point, only because there would simply be too much to get into. But there will be a lot to cut into when we do the translation for this video. This is meant to be just my own personal introduction to Albania, and I'm only coming into this with a very, very limited supply of information. But even so, it means one thing and one thing only, as far as I'm concerned, is that there's room to learn more. And that's the thing you've got to understand as well about people who are inherently ignorant. It's not as bad as it sounds, because it means they can be smarter. Strive to be less ignorant, ladies and gentlemen. That's an encouraging thought, I do say, if I have to say so myself. So, please rise indeed for the national anthem of Albania. So that was, ladies and gentlemen, Hymn to the Flag, Albania's national anthem, and that's given me quite a lot to think about. That was very, very interesting and very, very surprising. Those who avoid the struggle are born traitors to our laws. So, well, okay, first of all, I will have to say is that this, remember, a big thing I need to emphasize is this anthem was actually, it was brought about during the early 20th century. So we're talking the period of roughly about like during the 1910s. So it was not during their communist era. I wonder if this, I want to check whether or not this anthem was outlawed during that time as well. And it completely, if one came about as well. A hunger. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily say anything about whether or not it was outlawed, which was. I'm glad for that. I'm glad, because to be honest, I'm glad this thing was not outlawed, because it's, and I'll get into that in a second. The only thing as well is that its music and that the Albanian flag was raised during the Albanian proclamation of independence from in Vlor. And just to give a quick explanation as to what Vlor is. Vlor is the third most populous city of the Republic of Albania and the seat of the Vlor County and Vlor Municipality. Located in southwestern Albania, Vlor sprawls on the Bay of Vlor and is surrounded by the foothills of the Sarunian Mountains alongside the Albanian Adriatic and Lithuanian Sea coastal. I wonder if just what about its like significance in terms of like independence? So was it the idea that I'll certainly come back into this. Certainly, again, it's one of those things where it's sort of meant to be more about where we could go into a bit more about Albania's history, and again, it would be very interesting to know because when you go into like the history of nations, of countries or nations that I have next to no context for whatsoever, everything going into it will be new. It will be a proper education, not just reminders or refreshers on things I thought I knew, but also to be invited about things that I simply never knew before. Now, as to again this because this is like really like it struck me dumb a little bit. Only those who avoid the struggle, they were born traitors to our laws. He who is a true man is undaunted and dies a martyr to the cause. So, what technically counts as the struggle? Is it the struggle to for civil disobedience? Is it a struggle to maintain law and order? Is it a struggle to live peacefully, to live as you choose? Is it a struggle to just be allowed to get on in life? Is it the struggle that so many underprivileged, starving, diseased, sick, hungry, lame people go through every day, that they were not born with the advantages that so many of us go through, and so all they ask for is a little bit of a fairer chance, and they're constantly turned away? Is that what the relation to the struggle is? Is that we fight against a system that is always against us, and they will revolt and cry like demons for any semblance of change? Because again, it's one of those things you could argue there are so many things like going for and against, but then again, this might possibly have to do with a little bit more about its specific history of this era. Because certainly, again, this is but only a slight problem I have with actually going into a nation's history that I have no context for is that, to my mind, it could mean a multitude of things, but it might also be very, very specific as well. But then, of course, then there's this. He who is a true man is undaunted and dies a martyr to the cause. So, which is, I think I really like, well, that even could be a line that could even go as far back as Marcus Atilius Regulus. You may remember Regulus as the Roman consul who tried to conquer Carthage, who was then captured at the Battle of the Bagridas River, was told by the Carthaginians to travel all the way back to Rome to say to surrender or not, and then they asked Regulus to come all the way back to Carthage to be tortured and put to death. And Regulus, despite the fact that he could have just stayed in Rome, traveled all the way back to Carthage just to be executed by the Carthaginians. And Regulus was then immortalized as a symbol of Roman virtue and prosperity for never breaking a promise. Is that what that's certainly the idea of martyrdom, is that they died for a cause that was bigger than themselves. And it's again it could be one of those very interesting subjects about what qualifies as something bigger than us, and what counts in the eyes of maybe the Albanians as the symbol of a true man. Because again, the interpretation of a true man may be so entirely different in the eyes of the Albanians than it could be to the eyes of the Brazilians, the Dutch, the Kazakhstanians, the Portuguese, the Polish, the Scottish, the Welsh, the Irish, the Northern Irish, the English, the Russians, the Spanish, the French, the Americans, the Canadians, the Mexicans, the Venezuelans, the Cyrenaians, the Venezuelans, the Argentinians, the Chileans, the Italians, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Cambodians, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Morocco, South Africa, Albania, the Congo, Kenya, Somalia, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana. Again, it's you see what I'm trying to come across here is it simply just to be meant in more general terms about, in their eyes, a man is somebody who is uncompromising in what he knows to be true and dear, that a man simply must know what he believes is right and will continue working for it because that is the destiny he has chosen and the destiny he seeks to pursue. I only want to know because, again, when you're sort of confronted with lyrics like these in a very unexpected way, they've raised genuinely very surprising questions I'd never really thought to consider about, maybe when it comes to things maybe about like national identity or national character. But even so, these are things that probably it would be interesting to like even lecture myself in what's Albania's national language again? In Albanian. Okay, well, like I said as well, it'll be very interesting to actually go into this in Albanian, just so I can come to some sort of idea, some sort of conclusion, or even some sort of thesis about exactly what they had in mind. I can't wait to find that out because it'll be a challenge. But I'm always up for a challenge, you know what I mean? So anyway, I hope all of you guys have enjoyed this reaction video to Himni I Flamurit, the hymn to the flag. Please make sure to leave all your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Leave what you guys felt of Albania's national anthem for yourselves. And I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care and bye-bye for now.